Hey, it's Mazzy, and this video is my take on Fragments. In a way, the remix, the reimagining, the full archaeological dig of one of Bob Dylan's best albums ever, and that's Time Out of Mind from 1997. I'm going to get into it. Interesting thing about this album and this box set, since I've been doing videos, I've never gotten as many sort of requests and inboxes and comments, whether it's from Instagram, Mazzy's Music on Instagram, or even amongst other videos, is Mazzy, when are you gonna share your take on Fragments, this massive 10 LP box set? The reason it's taken so long is because this music deserves a deep dive. This is 10 LPs. Now, granted, I think only 4 of the LPs, 2 of the double record sets, and I'll give you a visualization too, but I want to talk about the music. It's the music, but it's also about this amazing, wonderful package from the Bootleg series. This is Bootleg series volume 17, and I'll give a little background and my take on it. This box deserved a deep listening, and it's been about a month now. I had to really listen to it. It wouldn't be fair for me, at least, for my love of Bob Dylan. I've been all in on Bob Dylan since about 1965, pretty much. But it wouldn't be fair for me to just grab this, slap a little bit on the turntable and tell you guys what I think about it, because you got to listen to this. You got to really dive in. Now, let me say this as a mea culpa in a way. I believe I did a ranking on Dylan in the couple years ago. And I don't even remember if I included this very high or not. I think I totally blew it on that one. So I've been diving back into the original version of this, the Daniel Lanois produced, the 1997 version. And, you know, if I ever get a chance to redo one of my videos, the Dylan video will be high on my list to redo it, because I totally left this low or off on that particular list, and it deserves a revisit from Maslov here. So that's my mea culpa here. I am all in on the Bootleg series. I have all 17 volumes, both CD and on compact disc, which is CDs, and on vinyl. And this is up there in the top 3, 4, 5, definitely. And for some reason, this one struck a nerve more than any other one, at least of late. Of course, you can't compare artistically and musicality-wise a 1964 or 66 Bob Dylan with a 1997 Bob Dylan. It just isn't fair. Like all the Bootleg series, there's always a great book with wonderful essays talking about the scene where Dylan was at the time, what, you know, historically what was happening in his personal life as well as his musical life. And this one is very important on what was going on personally in his life. And it also talks about the music and the songs, and of course the outtakes and some live versions in this case. Each record in this particular case is its own fully gatefold with a wonderful covers and packaging. And now these have these lovely kind of retro Columbia sleeves here. Now, I don't care about the lack of polyline sleeves. Give me a break. They sound great. They're not damaging the record. But this is a beautiful cover stock. Then there's Outtakes number 2, Outtakes and Alternates, that has songs. Some of the songs that were not on the album. One of which important song, Mississippi, that would be later on Love and Death. So he did carry on a couple tracks there, and very different versions. Outtakes number 3, these are each double albums again. You can kind of see the whole progress here. Wonderfully done. And then we go with a 1990 to 2001, some of the live things. Now, some of the recordings sound great, and some sound like audience recordings where you hear the people in the audience far too much. But think of it as an archive, a deep dive into the archive. The live, there's some great live versions on this. This isn't my favorite, I like the studio work. And of course, it ends up with previous released. These are songs from these sessions that were on previous Bootleg series and some of the other albums. So great 10 LP box set, wonderfully curated. Now, the big draw for most people on this release is how the main album, Time Out of Mind, was remixed. Totally remixed, totally changes the whole feel of the music, an entirely different sound of the record, especially. Dylan brought in Daniel Lanois again. They had worked together in 1989 on this wonderful record, Oh Mercy. You go to Daniel Lanois, you go to him for his sound. He's definitely have a sound. He's worked with U2. He literally changed direction and revitalized the work of Emmylou Harris. I've always been a fan since her first album, since the work with Graham Parsons, Grievous Angel, and GP. And in a way, you know, as a country artist, more country rock, country folk, she sort of was stagnant by the time, but working on Wrecking Ball gave her a different sound, gave her sort of a shot in the arm, in the creative arm. And this album has that Daniel Lanois post-production sound. He's into from effects pedals to overdubbing guitar parts multi-times with this almost like crunchy effect. And he definitely has a sound and a vision. So if you go with Daniel Lanois, you know what you're going to get. There's a sound that he's going to give you. And it worked wonderfully on this record. One of her all-time greatest records, an artistic achievement like nothing else. It made it a very, very different record and brought a whole new audience to her. Then a couple years later, Daniel Lanois would work on this album, Teatro. Now, Teatro is a big part of this story. That's the theater, I think it was in Oxnard, California, that Daniel Lanois bought or leased and transferred it into a recording studio. This was a transformation too for Willie Nelson, someone who literally seemingly puts out a record once a month, and he's always having records. This is another record that is a very different sound, a different record. On here is a great version of The Maker. That's a wonderful song written by Daniel Lanois that he wrote for the film Sling Blade many years ago. But again, the Teatro Theater is a big part of the story here, at least in Dylan's Time Out of Mind album. And of course, another record that was somewhat controversial, in 2000, he does La Noise with Neil Young. Effects pedals, multi-sounding records, tape loops, guitar loops, and I love this record. It's not for everyone. I think a lot of people were pushed away from the sound of it. Affected vocals, effects, but it is an amazing, amazing record, I think. So I wanted just to lay the foundation there. Dylan, again, had worked with Lanois and had this series of songs. And in 1995, Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead dies, and Dylan and the Dead had worked together. Ironically, Dylan and the Dead, that live album, is my least favorite. I dislike that album just so much, of Bob Dylan or the Grateful Dead. I think it's a terrible record. Maybe because I expected more. I love the Grateful Dead, I love Bob Dylan, and I thought their collaboration would be more rewarding. I did not see them live, so I don't know how the tour turned out, but that record just did nothing for me. So it really affected Bob Dylan quite a bit. And, the whole idea of mortality hit Dylan. And around this time, I think in the next year, in 96, I believe, he had some heart issues. There were sort of pulmonary issues that a lot of people thought that Dylan was going to die. And as this album came out, some people even thought this might be his last record. Of course, we know differently, thank goodness. But this was a very special record. Now, again, there was some tension between Daniel Lanois and Bob Dylan recording this record. But this record was a success. This record was huge by Bob Dylan standards. This record, I believe, either hit number 1 or number 2 on the Billboard charts. This won several Grammys, including the Album of the Year. Whether you think Grammys are important or not, it really brought Dylan back. It was one of many in his career comeback records. And it's a fantastic record. Yes, Daniel Lanois brought in his post-production over the top dubbing and crunchy sound he gets. Again, you know what you're going to get with Daniel Lanois. And so this whole idea of taking the record and scraping off that sort of that crunchy sound, that overdubbing, the effects that Daniel Lanois worked with Bob Dylan, makes this a very, very different feeling of a record. He brings on his touring band on this. He brings in Augie Myers, who a great organist. He works on the Vox organ, B3 organ, who was a member of a garage band actually, and the whole Texas scene with Sir Douglas Quintet, Sheet About a Mover and Mendocino, and has that really great sound. So there is a little bit of a garage rock feel to some of this. What's really wonderful about Dylan, he has the vision in his head, and he's not always able to express it verbally, but he knows when he hits it. And he gave recordings. He told Daniel Lanois, listen to Charlie Patton, listen to Link Ray, listen to Little Walter. It was a very bluesy, early rock and roll sound of these recordings. Almost maybe it should have been a mono record, right? If that's what he wanted. But he had a vision. Those great old Charlie Patton records have a very unique sound for the blues. And as bluesy as this is, he kind of turns some of the songs inside out. It's not all that 12-bar standard blues, but it's some wonderful songwriting. Again, the textural production of Daniel Lanois made this record, was an integral part of what this record was in 1997 and what it sounded like. And no matter how we revisit it now and remix it now, and what's great about this remix, a lot of people are praising the remix. But again, it's not like you're going to repaint the Mona Lisa and do it differently. It's just a different thing. And over the years, Dylan wasn't a huge fan of the sound on this. He always wanted to revisit it, and he finally got the chance to do it. But Time Out of Mind, 1997, of course, was a major accomplishment career-wise. And as we know, after that, Dylan never worked with an outside producer again. All his records since that, after that, Love and Theft and all beyond, were produced by Jack Frost, which is a pseudonym for Bob Dylan. That's Bob Dylan self-producing his record. He knows the sound. So the main hero of this box set is literally the remix. This record was remixed by Michael Brower, who did an excellent job. This could have been so wrong. This could have not worked. But he scrapes off that that crunchiness to it and brings it back to a little bit of rawness. It brings out a clarity without being too clear. It's just a wonderful, very successful remix. One of the more successful remixes, I think. I'm not a fan talking about the Giles Martin remix and the Beatles remixes of all, the Abbey Road and White Album and those. I think they're hit and miss. I don't think they need it personally. It's a revisionist tale. This is revisionist, yes, but it works. And so if you're a fan of this record and you don't really care about outtakes or live tracks, you can get a compact disc or a vinyl version of just the remixed album. And of course, this was his first double album since the Basement Tapes. Of course, in the CD era when this came out, artists were going beyond the 60-minute mark. I think this is 70 plus minutes on this. But it's a fantastic record. A lot of long songs, a lot of songs, again, about mortality. He almost died. His friend, Jerry Garcia, died. Intimate love songs, a dark record. It's just an alternate reality of the sound of this record. I wouldn't say it's better, it's different. And they're equally as good. This is a time where, now people are saying, oh, that sound is dated from 1997. But this makes it something new. Is it fresher? Possibly. It's not as of that time, but the songs really, you really hear the songs more, you hear the lyrics more. I think the lyrics, probably touch you more here. Again, the loss of love, loss of friendship, your own mortality, the darkness of the record. But it's not a doomy record. A lot of long bluesy songs, and the musicians on here. Dylan always knows when the musicians are right for the song. And I need to go a little bit through the outtake sessions, not song by song, but the fact that Dylan has his intuition that I think is always right for the most part. I mean, I have all the bootlegs. I go deep dives into the bootleg series. And what's the great thing about Bob Dylan is he's one of the few artists that his outtakes are better than a lot of people's regular final takes. His alternate versions, he'll change lyrics, he'll change keys, he'll change arrangements and tempos. And you really, really notice it on this record. I mean, there was a big fight between them, between Daniel Lanois and Bob Dylan, because of the song Mississippi. And there's several versions of Mississippi in this package that would come out, I believe, later on Love and Death. But Daniel Lanois, just the song wasn't happening for him. Some of the live versions actually are really good, and I don't want to diss them, even though it's some of the recordings are maybe less than optimal. They're still really amazing. And one thing I do want to add about live Dylan around this period, remember, he won Album of the Year at the Grammys, and he played at the Grammys last year. And one of the most hysterical things and one of the most bizarre things you'll ever see, and I want to insert a couple of stills here, is when he presented, I think he did a version of, I think it was Love Sick at the Grammys, the opening track here. And one of the background singers takes off his shirt and comes up and starts dancing, and he has Soy Bomb written over his chest. And it was one of those almost conceptual artistic moments. We had no idea if this was planned or real at the time. Of course, it turned out it was not planned. And Dylan just starts continually playing like nothing's happening, and his sort of stoic look. And it's typical Dylan, showing no emotions and no personality on stage. It's pretty much been Dylan forever. And I've seen Dylan, I don't know, 15, 20 times over the years. But this album has some gems on it too. In closing, let me say this is one of the special of the Dylan bootleg sessions. Again, I have them all. I love them all for different reasons, different parts and pieces, some better than others. But this, number 17, I would say is one of the best. And I want to kind of close out with this little story of sharing, and I hope I'm not embarrassing him. But if you know Joe Harley is tone poet. Joe Harley is the great tone poet of the Tone Poet series of Blue Note Records. Did Music Matters Jazz. He works with Kevin Gray and reissues all these amazing records through Blue Note. And just a great, great jazz fan. I've done a conversation on this channel with Joe, which I'll link to. Has nothing to do with Bob Dylan, but he's a huge, huge Bob Dylan fan. The weekend after this was released on the Friday, I started getting texts one day from Joe Harley about, Mazzy, did you get the Dylan set yet? Did you get Fragments yet? He was raving about this. Every 5 minutes, I would get these texts about, oh, you got to hear this, you got to hear that. And what's great about it is, because he even said this, he goes, everyone thinks all he listens to is jazz. All Joe Harley listens to is jazz. But he was raving about, he's an all-in Bob Dylan guy like me. I think Bob Dylan, aside from the Beatles, he's the greatest artist that I've ever listened to. He's, one of the great artists in my collection, the great artist, solo artist in my collection by far. But it was really fun for that back and forth for about an hour, hour and a half of Joe Harley talking about this. And I kept saying, you're teasing me, Joe, you're teasing me, because I haven't received my copy. And of course, mine would come 10 days later. And I thank everyone for reaching out. Even Joe is saying, Mazzy, you should, do a video on this album when it comes out. But I needed to listen to it. I needed to really digest it over the month. Now, I didn't do a dig deep into all the songs, but this is one of the best album sets that I've received in a very long time. And it's been in my turntable and in my car, and on the CD version. I had to get both versions. And I just love it. But again, the 10 LP set only available through the Dylan estate. And lastly, let me say, I did get people reaching out to me saying they got some warped copies and some noise on it. I'm lucky. No problems with my pressings. So thanks for watching. Again, Bob Dylan's Mortality record, Time Out of Mind, Fragments, the bootleg series, number 17. A fantastic release of a fantastic artist. Thanks for being patient, and thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Mazzy loves you.